So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the third and final episode of Factors for Success. And today's session, we're going to be looking at the outlook for success. So, those of you that have already watched the previous episodes, they are Mindset for Success and Structure for Success, and they are both available on the Apple YouTube channel. So without further ado, I'm going to switch over to the screen save, or screen share, should I say, and get the presentation started. Are you seeing that? Why are we not going into... We are having technical difficulties. Bear with me. That's not much fun, is it? Let's try again. There we go. How's that? Are you seeing that screen there? So, if someone just lets me know that they can see the presentation slide there?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, fab. Because I can't see you guys while this bit is on the screen. So I'm just going to run through the presentation. If you guys have any questions, by all means jump in, and we'll answer them as we go along. Outlook for Success is, for those that haven't been watching the previous episodes, is, as I say, the third and final part of the series, and it's all based on the outcomes from the psychological Hive, Connectivity for Success, which was written over a course of about 22 years worth of work, and that looked at the most successful companies and the most successful people, and the elements that existed or exist with both successful people and successful companies. And if those elements only existed in one side of that equation, they didn't make it into the listing. So, the psychological Hive, Connectivity for Success, demonstrates how using therapeutic principles to build your business actually makes the most amount of sense, rather than using traditional business structures, business models. When we look at the most successful companies and the most successful people, we find the similarities between therapeutic principles and their organizations and their personal successes are very, very similar. There is a reason for that. These companies, these individuals, have three standout factors: mindset, structure, and outlook. So we looked at the mindset first and went through get the job done, forward motion thinkers and Hive thinkers. And that first session really took us into why does forward motion thinking hold so many of us back and create some of the mental health challenges that a lot of us experience. The structure for success looks at the way the organizational pyramid, which has dominated the mindset and structure for companies and individuals for over 200 years, doesn't work for us anymore. Personally, I don't think it worked for us ever. But the NCS model is the only model that works for both businesses and individuals. And that's unique because it brings the balance of equality into both sides of our lives, our business lives and our personal lives. And by having that one system, we can take away a lot of the personal and psychological conflict that comes from the working arena. But today is about outlook. The dictionary says outlook is a person's point of view or general attitude to life. But we're very rarely given any indication as to how outlook is created. So we're going to look at 6 points: top communication, building a positive wall, reaction versus responses, my story, my future, needs, wants and desires, and protecting your attitude. So first off, TUB. Trustable, understandable, believable communication. When we understand that the communication we receive and the communication we deliver is measured by a TUB rating, we're able to effectively communicate a lot better. So think about the communication that you have from companies, and you'll be able to see where you trust that information, where you understand the information, where you believe that information. You feel a lot more comfortable about working with that organization. When you don't trust something, when you don't understand something, and when you don't believe it, you tend to find that you're listening to something that's come from a politician or poor companies. It's not about good customer service sometimes, it's about good communication and understanding that when we present our communication to the outside world, the same principles must apply. We have to be trustable, it has to be understandable, it has to be believable. And that is one of the benchmarks of forming the outlook at how we engage with the world and how the world engages with us. Next is building positive wall. You see what happened there? When we look at the world around us, it can just seem like a scramble of letters all over the place. But when we understand how things work, we get to see that having a team at our base is one of the fundamental building blocks for reaching our goal. Having systems in place that allow us, the timings are playing up, the systems in place allow us to reach targets and allow us to reach the goal. So with those in place, we can start to see how reactions and responses play out. Because when we react to something, it's knee-jerk, it's instant. And when we think things through, when we process the information, we get to responses. Stephen Covey, the author of 7 Habits for Highly Effective People, said, between stimulus and response is our greatest power, the freedom to choose. And that's something that when we look at how the most successful companies, the most successful individuals work, you can see that there is a very big difference between the way they react to a situation and the way they respond to the very same situation. Here's a graphic that will highlight how this works. So the situation occurs and it can be negative or it can be positive. And the longer the thinking time, the more we can decide whether we're going to react or we're going to respond. And invariably, if that's a short thinking time, we get a reaction that is either negative or positive, dependent on what our decision on the event itself is. So a positive reaction might be a fist pump, a hell yeah, a high five. It's very quick, it's very short, and it's very quickly moves into, okay, so now we've had a positive event, what do we do with it? When it's a negative event, it tends to be different. It tends to be the negative reaction goes on for a lot longer. And as the time passes from situation through negative reaction, ultimately we move into a response once we've processed the information. But it will take some more time before we have a balanced action as a result of that situation. And a balanced action is how we positively process, manage, and act on the basis of that event. The one thing that I discovered in working through this process was that the timeline from situation to balanced action is invariably the same, whether it's a positive reaction or a negative reaction to start with. The difference is the timeline that we spend in the response phase before getting to the action. When we're working with teams in business, whether we're working with teams in a coaching setting, one of the things that we find is that by helping people to understand that the timeline from reaction to response is roughly the same for the majority of us, whatever the event is. So when we know that there is going to be a response that's different to our reaction, we can start to work towards that response quicker. And by containing our reactions, because we know the response is the outcome that we want to achieve, we're able to get to a balanced action quicker. Now, for businesses, that's great, because you're able then to help your teams understand the response is more important than the reaction. You can hold things back. You don't have to demonstrate frustration, anger, upset at a negative situation right straight away. You can hold on to it. Let's get to the response. What do we need to do? Let's deal with this tomorrow when we've had a chance to think it through. And that's a vital key in understanding the difference between the most successful companies and the most successful people. Does that sit comfortably with you guys as to how you're able to interact with the world around you from the perspective of your reaction to responses?
I'm going to say yes. And I don't know if Ronnie showed you the video that I sent her at the weekend, but with what went on this week, my own personal growth journey made me realise that I responded to that in a different way than I would have previously. Yeah, well, it wasn't about me anyway. So I think it's, with all of these things we're learning, I think ultimately, in layman's terms, it comes down to self-awareness. Yes. And with that self-awareness, then we pause before we do anything, in which case we have a better outcome.
Exactly. And it's that self-awareness that in this graphic is that thinking time. And that's at being able to hold back, to take the time to think through the response we want to get to, rather than reacting to what has just happened. But it is the self-awareness to understand, actually, I can react to this situation, but in 2 days' time, I'm going to have to change and do something else as a result. when we find companies and individuals who are struggling with reactions and are said to be reactive personalities, in a large part, the challenge is that they're not able to get to a point of response because they are reacting to reactions to reactions to reactions. And they're not able to break that cycle. And as coaches and as therapists and as counselors and as business leaders, being able to help our teams and our clients to be able to achieve that break in the reactive personality presentation and get to a response phase is sometimes the critical turning point. Because without getting to that point of response, you're not able to get to a balanced action. And that can hold back every single one of us, whether we like it or not.
I have a question to ask you, Dave.
Yeah, sure.
Do you think that a lot of times when we react negatively, is it that we lack the, what's the word I'm looking for? We lack the proper listening skills. So we don't listen effectively. So we react quicker without really listening and really thinking through what we're hearing.
It can be a component.
Okay.
And it's one of those variables of what has our experience of life, universe, and everything been up until that point.
Okay.
If you think about a child who is brought up in a home where the volume of engagement from its parent or its caregiver is extremely loud.
Mm-hmm.
In order for that child to understand its place in the world, it has to match that volume.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's got no other point of reference to how do we engage other than at a high volume.
Right.
So that building block goes in place, and over time, if nothing else changes and that parenting style or that caregiving style stays at a high volume, it becomes reinforced. This is how you engage. So when they get a negative reaction, what will happen? It will be expressed at a high volume.
Right.
And it's breaking those kind of building blocks of negative engagement that allow somebody that as they grow into adulthood, grow into the business world, to be able to say, actually, there are different ways of dealing with these situations. It's a bit like when we were looking at structures and talking about the idea that the mind is binary and needing more kind of experiences in order to go from it's this or it's this to it's this, and therefore I've got choices about how I interact. But if we don't get experience of those differences, we only ever have that negative reaction demonstration. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does.
Cool. Okay. Any other questions on what I've touched on so far?
Just an observation from me, Dave, that I'm seeing training in transactional analysis would really help with this situation in companies.
Yes.
Because then when the negative reactive response comes, everyone knows to go to that adult place and calm the situation.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you guys a question, okay? And it's something that whenever I've presented reactions and responses, I've certainly in the last sort of 3 years, have brought to bear, and it's always interesting some of the responses that people give. So when we look at the presentations of reaction and response for two of the most contemporary world leaders, the differences and similarities are very hard to see sometimes. So when we look at Barack Obama, for example, do we see a reactive personality or do we see a responsive personality?
I see a responsive.
Okay. When we look at Donald Trump, what do we see?
Reactive.
Okay. So if I told you that the timeline between reaction and response for both gentlemen is roughly the same, would you be surprised?
Yes.
I would.
Okay. Let me explain why and how you can check that out for yourselves and then see it in others. So a negative situation happens. Barack Obama is sat in the Oval Office, okay? It has been reported, and I wasn't there, I wasn't party, I did not witness this firsthand. But it has been reported that when a negative situation happened during Barack Obama's time in the Oval Office, he would leave the Oval Office, go to the West Wing, and he would express his reaction. 2 days later, he would be in the press room, the White House, and he would be asked about a situation that happened 48 hours ago. And he would have his response. This happened, and this is what we're doing as a result of it. Now, you can see that how that played out when the election for Donald Trump campaign was going on, because Barack Obama was accused of being slow to react to situations.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now put the same situation with Donald Trump, and instead of going into the West Wing and expressing his reaction, he goes to Twitter and he tells the world his reaction. And 2 days later, he will be in the press room. It's obviously not as frequently now as it was, but he would be asked exactly the same question. Mr. President, this happened 48 hours ago. What's the situation? You said X, Y, and Z, or X, Y, and Z in the case of the US. Donald Trump's immediate go-to is, that is not what I meant. You are creating fake news. Because he's now got to his response time, and his reaction is now what is being dealt with rather than the situation. When we look at children who explode with their negative reactions, adults tend to have to deal with the reaction rather than the actual event that created it. And therefore, a child is trapped at that point of reaction rather than being able to get to their point of response. Does that make sense? At how we are seeing reactions are now becoming we have to sort out the reaction rather than the situation. All gone quiet.
It makes
You have my wheel spinning right now.
That a reaction is a symptom of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to figure out what the problem is. So surely the right way to deal with it is to fix the problem rather than dealing with the reaction, because by fixing the problem, the reaction will calm down anyway.
Right. But how many times do we see businesses, and in the example given, world leaders, being trapped at the reaction stage? It's almost as though the adult world, the business world, they see a situation, they react to it, and they can't get past the reaction. And then it's reaction after reaction after reaction, and the situation that could have been resolved by getting to a response has gone. Because you're anchored in the reaction, not in the situation. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
It's quite scary sometimes to see how that early kind of exposure to reaction and responses shapes so much moving into adulthood. You know, the example that was given to me when I was researching this was from a head teacher who said, a child who is sworn at or cursed outside of earshot of a teacher, who picks up the chair as they storm off out of the room, throw the chair across the room because they are offended at being cursed by another pupil. Does the teacher deal with the fact that this child has stormed out of the classroom throwing a chair, or do they deal with the fact that this child has been abused in the classroom? We've got to a point where we are dealing with the reaction, not the situation. And for businesses, that example rolls on because they deal with the reaction, they don't deal with the situation. As coaches, as business leaders, and as counselors and therapists, understanding that getting to the point of what's the situation, let's deal with the situation. The reaction will disappear. The reaction is just an immediate outburst. Let's get to the response of the situation, because then we can negate. And Obama did this exceptionally well because he hid the reaction from the world. He contained his reaction so that that was done in private and the world saw a very responsive leader. And the more people, businesses, and individuals look at that modality of operation, the more that we're able to get past the reactive state. Unfortunately, the world is being led by very reactionary personalities right now, but we won't get into that. But we can see how when that's just the negative response, what happens when it's a positive situation? We get great news. It's a very short reaction. The response lasts for longer, and then we fall into a balanced action as a result. And it's a lot calmer, it's a lot easier because it's a positive situation. But having spoken to top flight athletes who just keep winning, they're having positive reaction after positive reaction after positive reaction. They're not able to get to the processing and the balanced action because every week it's another win. And what happens is as soon as they have a loss, they fall into the negative reaction. And they're not able to get to a response because the learning of how to deal with positive responses hasn't been able to be there because they've just stayed in the reactive state. So it can be just as damaging by having only positive reinforcement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does definitely make sense. Now I have another question to ask. Maybe we'll fall into this line. So when you do have a child, and I'm just using a child as an example, who uses negative reactions to get positive feedback when it's really not positive feedback for them, but that's the only way that they feel like it becomes a positive reaction, because it kind of puts the limelight on them that they feel like they're not getting. And sometimes there's children who do negative things to get the feedback that they shouldn't be getting. I mean, like, how would you look at that? I mean, I've worked with people like that too.
Yeah, and there is, when you have and it's very, very common in reactive personalities, where the only way they can get a teacher to pay attention to them is because they've thrown the chair. The only way they can get listened to is by shouting louder than their siblings. The only way they can get that attention and that time with somebody else is by acting up. And you can go through all of the child development manuals on the planet, and they would always say, don't credit the behavior. But at some point, you've got to break that cycle.
Correct.
And the way that I find easiest is to ask the question, what created that explosion? What created that reaction? Because I'm not bothered that you broke the window. I'm not bothered that you threw the chair. I want to know what created that. And it's like, well, I don't know. You're taking the wind out of the sails, because you're not going, right, I'm going to scream and shout at you, take you to one side, put you on the naughty step because you broke a window. The window can be fixed, but if we don't fix the cycle, we will always be having broken windows. So it's about saying, look, do you know what? I don't care. The window's broke. It will get fixed. But right now, I want to know what caused that. And getting to the situation rather than the reaction. And slowly, what will happen is that they'll realize that they'll come to you with the situation rather than a reaction to it. But if you only respond to their reaction, then they'll only give you reactions. So the adult in the situation has to be able to get past their own negative reaction to a situation. But if the adult can't get past it, all they will do is reinforce it in the child. And by making the situation the point of focus rather than the reaction, ultimately you teach the child the situation is what's important here. Because they're looking for a different way of getting that time with you. They're looking for that positive reinforcement. Well, give them the means to, give them the right currency to bring to you. And slowly they will. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I come in here?
Yeah, of course.
I can't see who else is on the screen, so my apologies, but I would like to say hello. I'm having a technological nightmare here, so I'm doing everything from my phone. But in the same way that I'm picking up at what you're saying, David, so in exactly the same way in a therapy room, if somebody's sitting in front of me and getting angry, and often it's transference, by actually exploring that anger rather than reacting to it and becoming defensive and justifying, it takes you down the same route of helping them understand their reactions, where it's coming from, and actually look at addressing it.
Yeah. And it's exactly that, building the awareness. And as Michelle said earlier, it is about that self-awareness, that what's the situation and how am I reacting to it? Why am I reacting this way? But it takes time to build up. But the earlier we can start that process, the easier it is for that child, then young adult to have those skill sets in place. Does that make sense to
Total sense. And
yeah.
I was chatting with my clients on Monday night because they were talking about letting go of situations because of their reactions to various situations. And I said to them, you have to kind of take a step back, like pulling an arrow back, or like when a wave is getting ready to break, it pulls back. So you've got to pull back so you can figure out what the thought processes were that led to that reaction. Mm-hmm. And then once you figured that out, you can take the steps to move forward. And they couldn't understand, well, until we started talking about it, they couldn't understand it. You have to take a step back to take the step forward, to let go. And I think this is a similar thing. You know, you have to take the step back to understand what's happened mm-hmm. in the situation that's caused the response. And then you can cause the reaction, and then you can move forward in a more responsive way.
Exactly. And taking a step back and working with somebody to be able to do that can be really, really difficult, because they are reactive. That's their MO. That's what they've been conditioned. That's what they've been groomed into being, because that's been their point of reference. One of the tools that I've used as a coach is the understanding when somebody says, this is just the way I am, this is the way I do it. And when something happens, it's like I just hit a brick wall. Think about that brick wall. It's made up of lots of individual component parts. And when you hit it, it's at your nose. You can't see the top of the wall, you can't see the sides of that wall, because it's right up in front of you. When you take a step back, you can actually see that it's component parts. And one of the things that Siobhan has put together in the VC method of understanding about the processes of understanding for ourselves is that those component parts can be dealt with individually. And we can take that brick down, and we can take that brick down. But we can't do it if we're 3 inches away from the wall, because we can't see it. All we can see is one brick that's at eye level, and that's the one that we've just run into. So while Siobhan is actually in the group, do you want to just bounce in, Siobhan, with a run over of the VC method?
Yeah, I'll do it very, very quickly, because yes, I also know what I can't say. So what I created was homework for everybody that comes to me, unless they come to me in relation to the loss of a person through death. It's the only time I don't use this model. Now, the model is built up of event, feeling, thought, reaction, consequence. So the event is any single thing that creates a feeling. And because we feel and think all the time, it's not about focusing on the negative, it's not about focusing on the positive, it's about training your brain to be consciously aware of how you feel. When you recognize how you feel, you can then react to your own feelings by processing them and creating a response. So, for example, me trying to get into this meeting earlier. My feeling was an element of frustration because I couldn't work out how to connect to the TV, and I promised to get on here at a particular time. My thought process was, you're getting frustrated. There's no point in that. Just use the phone. They'll understand, it'll be perfectly okay. You can't be there for that long anyway, but at least you can pop in, join in, and work it through. And instantly, by being aware of that element of frustration, knowing it comes from a place, because I've done a lot of work on myself, helplessness at not being able to be very good at technology, but being aware of that helplessness, the frustration covers that, I'm aware of that, I can instantaneously go, you know where that's coming from, put it to one side, focus on what you can do rather than what you can't do, which is use the phone instead of the laptop or the TV, and just run with it. It'll be fine. So I end up smiling at my own ability to be able to process that, because I've trained myself to do that through my own work and in relation to the teachings that I've got, but I also practice that model with everybody in the room. You see patterns appearing in their feelings that are repetitive. Mm-hmm. And by being able to do psychoanalytical work with helping them process where the origins of that feelings are and combining that, it tends to work in a two-way streak, if you like. They're doing the work outside the room between the appointments. They're becoming more and more aware naturally, but they're also looking at processing the feelings that arise from those examples, the ones that they actually want to change, and actually process where they're coming from. And the two work together absolutely beautifully. I know, Dave, I'm going to have to go.
I know.
So I apologize to having to remove myself from the room on the basis of giving that piece of information. But if anybody does want to speak to me about that, I'm more than willing to talk to them about it. Dave, I'm glad that I've been able to just pop in for a few minutes and see what you're up to and see how everybody else is. But I can't see anybody at the moment. So I'm going to say goodbye to everybody on this note. Really appreciate the opportunity to pop in. And just to let you know, Ollie was going mad, so the phone was on mute. As soon as she heard your voice, I had to on mute or else she'd bark the house down. Please have a lovely afternoon. Keep up the good work, and I'll catch up with everybody another time. And please take care.
No worries. Take care. Thank you very much for the input and making the time to be there. So thanks for that. For everyone else, the VC method that Siobhan just laid out there, it shows the importance of having the thought secondary to the feeling and acknowledging the feeling first. And that's something that the vast majority of us are not allowed to do as we grow, because it's all about what do you think you're doing, not how do you feel about this situation. And when we work with people and focus on how they feel about a situation, we're able to get past those reactions very, very quickly. So in answer to Teresa's question around getting somebody out of that cycle, focus on the feeling rather than what they think has been said or they think a situation might be. Does that prove useful to everybody there?
Thank you.
I absolutely agree with that, because I think when we focused on how and bringing in that feeling, that's also teaching them how to make those decisions, teaching them how to take control of what is going on with them. Mm-hmm. So I absolutely agree with that.
Right. So the next part is my story, my future. And on the back of being able to understand how we feel about a situation that has happened, therefore it is in the past, we're better able to make the decisions, as you say, Teresa, about how we deal with that. And that's future. And that's why the image has a foot in both sides of those stories. Our future, our past does not define our future until we cross over and say, right, okay, I'm just going to sit here in my past. But if we keep moving forward and our future will tomorrow be our past, and so on and so forth. We keep moving forward. We don't let the past hold us back. And when we look at the most successful companies, the most successful people, they understand better than the majority that what they learn from their past can only impact on their future if they let it, or they let it go and it's right, I learned from that, I'm not going to repeat that. And they build up that sense of who they are as an individual, or who they are as a company. For here, for now, not for yesterday. In the experiences that everyone that's watching this has had, I would guess that we have all had times where that has been exceptionally difficult to do. But when we've got past whatever it was that was holding us back and stepped into that future, we've kind of questioned, why did it take us so long? Why did I let that hold us back for so long? And when we look at the most successful companies, where they have something that is holding them back, they are very quick to identify it and resolve it. For the majority of us, that takes a bit more time because we don't have that point of reference to be able to do that as individuals, let alone as companies. So by holding on to everything that we've already been through up until this point, understanding that how we feel about a situation has a direct impact on how we deal with it, we can see why people like Richard Branson, for example, will start a company and very quickly go, actually, this doesn't fit, this isn't working, pull it out. It's not, it can't carry on. When we look at companies like Disney, who have reinvented and re-engaged and created collaborations in the last 20, 30 years that 20, 30 years ago, they would never have even contemplated, because they've realized that actually they've got to move forward in a way that isn't the same as what was holding them back in the past. And allowing our clients and our colleagues to step into that awareness is another one of those building blocks of self-awareness that makes a difference in moving towards our own outlook of success. Does that make sense for the experience, against the experiences that you guys have had?
Totally for me, Dave. And you've made me smile, because this has reminded me of when I was at college and we were doing skills practice. Mm-hmm. And the guy said to me, so you're letting go of the past then? And I said, I'm letting go of it, but it's coming with me to the future because it's the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing in the future. So
it becomes a marker on your journey. It doesn't have to be the baggage that you carry.
No, that's right.
And that's a key part of the outlook that you now have built for your future. The past doesn't have to be the anchor. It can, using another nautical kind of analogy, that marker buoy can just sit there in the sea as you carry on going, and you can always look back and go, that was the point at which I realized I could let go of those anchors. Right? Okay. Any questions on this concept, this idea of my story, my future?
No.
No? Okay. So a key part of my story, my future, is acknowledging the achievements. Understanding that at some point, all of your achievements were laid out in front of you. And they might have been difficult to see, like jigsaw pieces. But it's not until you're able to lay them out so you can actually use those achievements that you're able to progress towards the success. And having the outlook that takes you from that moment of looking at all of these things that have happened, all of these achievements, and going, well, you know, what do I do with all of this? You know, I can look back and I can see it all. What do I do with it? To the point of being able to lay it out in such a way that actually works for you, rather than just more things in your history, is a key component of the outlook towards success. But if we cannot get our needs, wants, and desires into the right place, we will always struggle. So I'm going to ask you guys a question. When you see that on screen, needs, wants, desires, what comes to your mind? Anybody? Is there anybody there?
So for me, needs, I'd be looking along the lines of Maslow's hierarchy, for one thing, because it's about we need air to breathe, we need water to be hydrated, we need food to survive, sleep, I can't remember the others. Oh, mating. Yeah, I can't remember the others. Once, I want a herd of fell ponies. You knew that was going to come up. But and that is a desire, and they're not things that I need to survive.
Mm-hmm. Needs, wants, desires. How often do we hear people say, I need X, when what they actually mean is, I want X?
I hear it all the time.
Okay.
I'm guilty.
We're all guilty of it. You know, I need sugar. No, I don't. And like Michelle says, I need air. You know, I'm not gonna be able to survive on sugar. Right? My body wants it because it works better with it than it does without. But we have taught generations of people that needs, wants, and desires are an interchangeable expression. And they're not. And when we look at the most successful businesses and the most successful people, they've got needs, wants, and desires in the right order for the right things at the right time. And when we look at what's going on in the world around us, we can see how this failure of getting these things in the right place has played out and has impacted across the world. When the health scientists and the doctors and the medics say, we need you to do this in order to be safe, they've lost the power of need. Because what the world sees is you are telling us you want us to do this for whatever reason, but it's not a need. We don't need to do it. It's you want us to do it. And that creates that conflict in messaging and breaks down the trust, understandable, believable communication. And there is our first counter connection. Because the communication of need, wants, and desires is no longer trustable, understandable, or believable. successful companies, they get it right, they get a high tub rating on communication. And we can see why when we understand these two components together. Does that all fit? Do you see how those two tie up?
Totally.
By giving a sense of understanding needs, wants and desires have to be in the right place for those companies, it allows them to be able to engage with a high tub rating, which means when they tell you their story, when you understand what that company is, who that company is, we get it. We believe it. We trust those companies because all of these components are in place. And it's all because their outlook is built around these elements. And when their outlook is built around these elements, it filters into their DNA. It makes the connection to their success that much more tangible. But if they don't protect their attitude, it all falls by the wayside. And we all experience times as human beings where we forget to protect our attitude. Something goes wrong and we quit. Something happens and it knocks us for six and it takes us days to get back on course. And it's because we've allowed our attitude to our own success to be diminished by what's happening outside, rather than knowing what's going on inside. So, let me explain the graphic. So, you at the center of your world will be surrounded by really positive people who get you, they understand you, they support you, they guide you, they help you. Outside of that ring, you'll have people that are kind of a little less supportive. You might not see them every day, you might not speak to them every day, they might be more colleagues and associates rather than close working partnerships. And then you have puddles who really they're on the edge of your world. They really don't give you any more energy than they take from you. Kind of neutral. When you're protecting your attitude, you're able to control the communication and the information that you share about you and your world. So the people closest to you want you to know. They want you to know what's going on for them, and you want them to know what's going on for you. Those that are the puddles, they're the ones that need to know, but really you're not fussed whether or not they do or don't. It's more a it's a courtesy. We do a press release. It's a courtesy to make sure that we share it with certain people, as an example. But we're not really expecting anything from it. It's a courtesy. And then we have drains. And these are the people, the organizations who really have a low tub rating in their communication. They're the people you have to tell, but you really don't want to. Just get them out of the way. When you're protecting your attitude, you understand all of these things and you communicate appropriately because of it. And that allows you to protect yourself, your feelings, your thoughts about any situation that you are having to deal with. And when you can protect your attitude, it doesn't matter so much what is being said outside of your circle or outside of your organization, because you're able to deal with everything from the inside out. Does that make sense to everybody? and it's all quiet again. So, everybody's gone, it's all gone quiet. I hope I haven't scared everybody off.
I'm still here.
Okay.
And I'm here too.
Okay, fab. So, protecting the attitude really does allow us to contain how we interact with what's going on around us. So the outlook for success with all of those things in play becomes a lot easier to manage for our own success. But if we've got the majority of those things in play in our consciousness, not just, oh, it's there at the back of the mind and you know, it comes out once in a blue flood. When it's in our consciousness and it's active in the way we look at the world around us, it's able to be very, very effective at demonstrating to the world outside, actually, we've got this sewn up. You can trust us. You can understand what we're doing. You can believe in what it is that we're putting out. You can see our story and our future, because that's what social beings do when they engage with people. They see the story, they see the history, and they can see the future layout in front of them. And it makes for a much more conducive pathway to your own success as a result. That's the outlook for success. So, questions, thoughts, over to you guys. Where we at? Anybody? Have I just spun your minds? Have I just kind of, what's happening? Talk to me.
No, I actually think this was a really good one, especially focusing on responses, reactions. I'm guilty of reacting, learning over the years of how not to quickly react, because a lot of times my quick reactions always comes out with a negative outcome. So this really helped me to really look at some things, and just even with past clients as well. So I'm still soaking all of this in, but it's very interesting how, just basically what I learned today.
And it's great that there is that self-awareness that we all do this. We all react. We're human beings.
Mm-hmm.
But by being aware of that, and by being able to put those component parts in play and work on, well, actually, how do I feel about this situation? Not what do I think about this situation? We're able to kind of slow things down and get to a response a lot easier. Michelle, what are your thoughts?
I think you've taught me today I'm like Barack Obama.
You hide your reactions. That's what you just told me.
Yeah, I don't go to the West Wing. I have special people that I phone. Maybe you, maybe my sister, and then I do my rah, 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 rah to them, and then I go and deal with it in the way that I want the rest of the world to perceive I behave all the time. Yeah,
but you do behave like that all the time.
Of course I do.
and this is the thing. It's part of that protecting your attitude. Because when you make those calls, when you go to that virtual West Wing, as it were, you call me as coach, you call sister, you're going to your team and going, this is what I want you to know. And then as that information flows out, it's what I need you to know.
Yeah. And actually in that conversation, I get to the point of going, so what was I thinking about that made me react like that? So actually it's not about the situation, it's about me feeling and thinking in this way.
And this is what, when APA is working with businesses, when APA is working with professionals, we are always working towards building this into that understanding. And it's crucial as we come to the end of the Factors for Success series, that we don't lose sight that these three kind of building blocks, if you like, they create the pillars for our success. They're not the only elements involved. There are so many other variables that we don't need to work on all of those different variables. We may need to focus on one or two, and the rest will fall into place. But if we don't have those three pillars in place, then our success will undermine itself, because we haven't got these things built into play. I hope that what the series does as a whole is show that we don't have to do component by component by component. We can go to the component we need when we need it and focus on that component. But if we don't have the mindset that says, actually, I don't want to be a bicycle anymore, I want to be a rocket, I want my business to be a rocket, not a steam train, we're going to be able to move forward in a way that's more supportive to those we work with, those we work for, and those that are around us as personal contacts, personal friends, etc. But it's the connectivity of all of those elements that make each one of those pillars. So, any last questions before we wrap up and kind of say thank you to everyone that's taken part?
I like what you said, Michelle, when you talked about, you know, the reaction and what made you feel like that, and realizing that maybe it's more of your emotions. And it's so funny because my son always says to me, Mom, I need you to come about your emotions for a second. About your emotions for a second, because me and my daughter, we clash all the time, and it just frustrates me. And he has to remind me, you need to come out of your emotions so that you can be able to communicate with her better. Mm-hmm. And he's absolutely right. And I think even as women, we have that challenge, you know, just even in the working world, in the entrepreneur world, you know, we get in such our emotions. We are quick to be triggered off by maybe someone's attitude. And then we might say that, well, I don't want to listen to her. And she might have great information, but because she might have said one thing that put us in that emotion, we just channel everything out. And so I like that when you mention that, because we do often get into our emotions, and our emotions make us react.
I would suggest that the emotion, that feeling that takes us to the reaction, mm-hmm. when we can understand what that feeling is, mm-hmm. and where that's come from, that's the break. That's where we start to say, okay, so I'm upset. It's okay, I'm upset. She just upset me. But why? Why am I upset by that? Because that's her. That's not me. I wasn't upset before she said that. So what is it that she's giving me, her upset. It's her upset that she's trying to give me so that I feel upset.
Correct.
Why am I carrying her emotions? They're her emotions, not mine. I was fine before she said all that. Break it down so that we know what is outside of us and what is ours. And when we're able to do that, we can stop wearing the bad coat that somebody else has given us.
There's that monk story, isn't there? Let me see if I can remember it properly. So there's an old wise monk walking on a journey with a younger monk, and they come across old lady in the road who can't cross the river. And the younger monk says, well, we're not allowed to help because we're not allowed to, I can't remember the details, but let's just say they're not allowed to interact with this person. And the old wise monk picks the lady up, carries her across the river, sets her down and carries on his journey. And towards the end of the journey, the younger monk says, why did you carry that woman? That goes against all the rules. Why did you help? Why did you do this? And the old wise monk says, why are you still carrying that woman? And I just think that really sums up other people's baggage that we take on, and, you know, understanding that we can let go of it. And actually life is so much freer when we do, and easier. And I know I say it every time we speak, Dave, but I wish what we learn in our roles as coaches and therapists is that it was taught in schools. Because if the kids coming through school now had that education, oh my God, what a world we're going to end up living in.
Well, the Dalai Lama has said for as long as I can recall, so we're talking, you know, well over 30 years, that when we teach 8-year-olds to understand their feelings, we will teach them how to forgive. And when we teach them to forgive, we will teach them to be better people. And it's because of understanding where our feelings come from rather than what our thoughts come from. Because our thoughts are taught to us. Our feelings come from inside us. And that's a crucial key in understanding when somebody upsets us. When somebody throws a curveball at us that we're not ready for. And I can use, you know, the personal experience of my life being turned upside down in a split second and having all of the pain that comes with that and being able to go, actually, what do I feel about this? Not what am I thinking about the fact that my world has been turned upside down. It took me a long time to get there. That did not happen at the same time. But it's about being able to take those lessons and set them over that situation. And when we're able to do that, we're able to really step back, as you was pointing out before, that ability to step back, take a look and go, actually, what do I need to carry into the next bit? And no person has a single situation that has to end the story at that point. We have our choice. As Steve Covey said, at that moment between situation and stimulus is our choice. And we choose our attitude and we choose what we do as a result. And hopefully with the outlooks for success, we're able to kind of make kind of different decisions about how we outlook on those situations when they come and challenge us. But that's what, you know, the factors for success is all about. Understanding that it's not just one thing that is going to make everything right. It's component parts. It's building up that knowledge, that understanding, and being able to have the self-awareness of what's inside us to be able to understand what's being given to us by somebody else and put the value on that. So when somebody comes to us and says something that's really rude, really nasty, everything else, would you ask this person for advice? then why are you listening to what they say when they tell you they don't like you? If this person came up to you in the street and said, "Hi, I know you don't know me, but I'm going to tell you something now that's really stupid," would you pay attention to it? So when they say something that you know is stupid, why are you still paying attention to it? Just because they haven't announced what they're about to say is stupid? Invariably, when we know that that person is in our circle, they are a drain. We know what comes out of the drain is not going to be positive. Why are we letting it come into us? That's theirs. Let it stay theirs. Our outlook is for our success moving forward. So, on that note, I'm going to say thank you very much to everybody. I want to say a special thanks to Siobhan for chipping in with the VC method and letting everybody know about that process and how focusing on the feeling before the thought actually has a major impact on the outlook that we have moving forward from any of those sessions. I hope the whole series has been useful to everybody, and I look forward in the next month or so to showcasing more from the psychological hive and some of those key elements within there. But for now, for everyone, thank you very much for taking part. I'll see you next time.
Thanks, Dave.